Let's return to calls from business leaders for realistic jab targets to reopen Australia. Joining me now is Willox, Chief Executive of the Australian Industry Group. Thanks very much for your time. A lot's been made of the plan. Some have said it's not a plan at all. What are your views?
Well, Tom, it is the outline of a plan, and that's a good thing. It's very positive that governments are looking forward, and we welcome that, but there's still an enormous amount of detail to be filled in here. It's not much of a plan if you don't have key metrics in place around what should be delivered and when, and that's what we're still waiting to see. So we want to see that detail, but the point is, it is, as it now stands, a long mountain climb that we face to get out of where we are now and move through these phases, and that's what's of great alarm to business at the moment. This plan is no quick fix. We don't expect it to be a super quick fix, but there's a real concern this isn't quick enough, particularly around areas like the reopening of our borders and getting our vaccine rates to a fair and reasonable level where we can open up. And a big concern, Tom, that's been expressed to me by business leaders since the plan was announced last Friday is that there's a real potential here that we might set ourselves up to fail. We might set a target too high and leave us in the hands of others who are vaccine hesitant or even deniers, and that's stopping us from reopening as we should. So we would say when they fill in the gaps, make it fair, make it achievable, make it workable. We understand this is a compromise, understand it's complicated, but we can't set ourselves up to fail, and that's a concern.
So you mentioned they're filling the gaps. The key gap is obviously the vaccination rate, and the PM said, well, that's off with the scientists. Should he have sent a clear signal about what his responsibility, and the Premier's as well, is in this, and that is what level of risk should those scientists be calculating things on, i.e. hospital rates and, to put it bluntly, death rates as well?
Well, our chief health officers, who seem to have been taking the reins of running big parts of the country in recent months, have been highly risk averse. When we talk about risk, we do need to balance risk here. The UK is opening, as you just demonstrated earlier, on July 19 with a vaccination rate of around 60%. We've had it mentioned, by some, just sort of putting forward numbers, that we should aim for a number of around 80% in Australia. We're getting up there. No country is really at that level yet, and we've had mass vaccination programs in the US and the UK, for instance. So we don't want to make it a point that is too hard. And we were very struck by the comments by Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, that everyone in Australia who is eligible for a vaccine should be offered the vaccine, but then they have to make a choice, but then we have to get on with it as a country. And I think that's the important message here. We can't sit forever waiting for the last dribbles of numbers to come in to reach a particular target. We have to be quite clear. People will be given the opportunity, and then we have to move on.
So would that have been perhaps a better thing for the PM to grasp at? Because we had Victoria and Queensland say if everyone's been offered, and it wouldn't need to be on the first day they've all been offered, you'd need a few weeks to pass, maybe even a month or two, so they've had the opportunity to do it. But at that point, all they said was there'd be no lockdowns. There was no mention of international borders. Nonetheless, would that have been a better and earlier milestone? Grasp that one, hope it goes well, and then move on to the next one and take the earlier concrete victory, if you like?
Well, that's what the scientists have to work out, and I'm sure there's going to be an enormous amount of liaison with government, and there's more consultation planned, over the coming days post this meeting around what targets should be set and how they should look and how everyone can interact, business, the broader community, the workforce, all of that. So there'll be more work to be done, but we're just concerned. We've made it very clear that if we hog tie ourselves to a specific number early on, then we really have the potential to set ourselves up for failure. Yes, they just said no more lockdowns, but we need more than that. Everyone's over lockdowns. That's all very obvious, but we need to find ways to reopen our borders, get skilled workers back into the country, hopefully get students back into the country, and get something approximating the old normalcy. Not that there ever will return to the old normal, but something approximating it again. Or else, the longer we wait, the more countries will reopen. We're seeing it more and more, UK, US, Singapore, others as well. and we'll get left behind, and we just can't afford that. So it's a balancing act, but don't make it too hard on the high wire so we're certain to fall off.
So the other aspect about the conversation, the key metrics at the start and what we will get back to seemingly is minimising deaths, which we do with all things, including influenza, and also hospitalisations, is the tricky part, perhaps the unspoken one right now, that our hospital systems at the moment are geared so they can cope, and sometimes only just, with flu cases, the surge in winter. Flu and COVID might mean that at the moment, if you have COVID as the same risk as flu, well, they might be overwhelmed.
Well, Tom, this is where we have to weigh up risk, and what we've had over the past 18 months, understandably at first, was a real weighting towards the health as we discovered more and more about COVID. But what business people are generally saying is that we're now at the point where we had repeated lockdowns in some jurisdictions, which has just smashed our economy, smashed job prospects, caused enormous mental health damage across the community. All of these things have to be weighed up, as well as the overall state of the health system. You would hope and think that 16 months on, that our premiers and chief health officers have got to the point of getting the hospital systems and their contact tracing and tracking to a point where they have greater confidence in being able to manage this as we get more and more vaccinated. We're at 30% of people with one vaccination. Because we went AstraZeneca, it's going to take a bit longer to get through to the second dose for a lot of people, but we're heading in the right direction, and business would just urge our political leaders and our health leaders to have a bit more confidence in their systems so that we can open up, because of the damage it is causing, and the longer we wait is going to make recovery that much more difficult, and we need to be aware of that too. We can't go through until mid-2022 before we open our borders in any way, Tom. That's just sort of the bridge too far.
Can I just ask you finally, how do you see sort of convincing people? Because a lot of states are locking down and there is popularity amongst it. Is it about emphasising what we're missing out on? Yes, with business, students, the economy, overseas travel, or is it about the honesty of the conversation? People die from other things. They die from flu. They do get sick. It will happen with COVID. Is it about that blunt message? What do you see as the emphasis?
It's a combination of them both, Tom, quite frankly. We have been living in a gilded cage here. We've been living off enormous government support, and people may forget that as time goes on. Federal and state government support. That can't last forever, and we're still locked away as we were a year ago when that support was introduced. That support's not going to be there from now on. So what was sort of a first stage of COVID normal, complete reliance on government support and stimulus, won't be there. We don't know yet if our economic situation is self-sustaining and self-improving, because we're still relying on supports that will disappear over time. And so you've got to get that balance right. The longer we're locked up and locked away, the harder it will be for us to recover and for businesses to get a good traction and a good foothold and be able to bounce forward. That'll mean jobs, that'll mean economic prospects for our young people, it'll mean our young people being able to engage in the workplace again, as we all did and would like to. These are all the things that have to be weighed up. So it is a balancing act, Tom, but at some point we've got to switch the risk from adverse to at least taking a chance here and backing ourselves.
Willox, thanks for your time.